Hi Sue, thanks for joining us today.
Hi Andy, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good. Oh, it's great to have you. And yeah, we've worked together on several other projects in the past, and it's great to have you on the podcast today because I know we're going to have a lot that we can discuss. And it's been quite a passion of yours for a while, hasn't it? Thinking about putting more focus on the dog's emotional experience within the grooming environment.
Oh, completely. Yes, it just makes total sense to me because if the dog's calm, I'm calm. If I'm calm, the dog's calm. So it's a win-win situation.
And I think there's a lot of people listening who might have dogs who go to the groomers and who might perceive that their dogs struggle with the grooming experience. And you and I have discussed in the past about the importance of separating the task from the kind of understanding of the dog's emotional care needs. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so when a lot of caregivers take the dogs to the groomers, to the gardener to obviously groom their dog, but expecting the groomer to know how to handle their dog, how to keep their dog calm. And a lot of the time, the main focus of grooming is on the style. So most groomers will concentrate on getting your dog looking perfect when it comes out the salon, whereas ultimately we really need to be thinking on how the dog feels when it comes out of the grooming salon. So it's all well and good the dog looking perfect on the outside, but if it's feeling really distressed on the inside, that's not going to make a pleasant task for it in the future. It may struggle with other handling at home as well as at the vets because it's had what it perceives as a negative experience at the groomers. And it's not that the groomers actually done anything wrong, it's just that they probably haven't paid attention to the dog's body language, that they're a little bit anxious, they're not comfortable with what's being done. So consent grooming, which is how I groom, is really paying attention to the dog's body language and working with the dog rather than worrying about what the dog looks like when it goes out of the salon.
And that's a really important distinction, isn't it, between the two things? And I think from what I know, I'm not a groomer myself, but talking to some of my grooming friends, actually paying attention to the dog's emotional state, to that body language, to the experience they're having early on, and maybe not having that perfect groom, and maybe not even finishing a groom in that particular session, means that you can do more down the line.
Completely. I've just introduced a special puppy package, and I've got groomers booked onto the course now to follow the puppy package I offer. And it is all about working with the puppy, because if I can get a puppy that's never been to the groomers before, I can start it off on a really good journey. It builds up a relationship with the salon first, not even with me. So it gets to know my salon, gets to know the noises, the smells. And then once it's confident in the salon, it's going to be more confident with me. And then I can start handling. And eventually, you know, I can give it a little brush and see how it reacts, or pop it in the bath, see what it's like with clippers switched on or the dry switched on. And it's about introducing everything really slowly at the pace that the puppy can cope with. And then by the time the puppy's 6, 7, 8 months old and ready for its first full groom, it's confident being bathed, it's confident with the dryer, it's confident with the clippers. So I can then start to think about, you know, what the guardian wants a little bit more. You know, do they want the nice fluffy finish, or do they want a short finish? But if I can get the puppies to feel good and get used to being groomed in a positive consent-based manner, then that adult dog then is such an easy dog to groom, because it just knows what to expect now. It knows that I'll give it a break if it needs one, but if I've had them from puppies, it's rare they need a break when they're fully grown. Likewise, I get a lot of dogs referred to me because they've really struggled to the grooming salons, and again, I treat those new dogs in the salon just like I treat puppies. So they get to know the salon first, then me, then all the equipment, although they'll know the equipment. But because I know they've found grooming difficult previously, I've got to reintroduce all that equipment in a positive manner. Because if I just do a full groom like previous groomers have done, I've changed nothing. So the dog's not going to feel any different either. So by breaking all the groom down again, finding the areas that it does struggle with. So for example, if it struggles with the clippers, I might scissor it for the first few sessions so that I can start to introduce the clippers with positive reinforcement rather than forcing it to be clipped when it cannot cope with those clippers near it.
And this is the key, isn't it? I think whether it's the puppy or whether you've got a dog who's being introduced to the grooming experience, or a dog who already has a negative experience with the grooming experience, and you're kind of helping it, putting that time in initially, and for the caregivers to invest both the time and a bit of money, can really save a lot of money actually, and also a lot of stress both for the caregiver and the dog down the line.
And the groomer.
And the groomer, of course, yes.
There is nothing worse than, there's nothing worse than trying to groom a dog that really doesn't want to be groomed. It's emotionally, physically and mentally demanding. Whereas if I've got a dog that I break it all down for, and yes, it might not have a full groom each time it comes, but that dog can go out the salon feeling fairly calm. I'm fairly calm. The guardian's happy because we've managed to achieve something. And to be fair, I would say 4 or 5 appointments with a new dog that's had a negative experience before, I can usually turn them round in that, or not necessarily turn them round but find a way how I can groom that dog without distressing it. So it might be that a full groom all in one day is too much for some dogs. So I would recommend that the guardian baths it the day before. So we've not got to worry about bathing and drying in the salon. But it means that I've got a clean dog then, so I can just clip it or scissor it the next day. And it can probably cope with half hour of me scissoring and clipping, but it can't cope with hour and a half of me bathing, drying, and then finishing. So it's about finding a route for each dog that it can cope with without getting too distressed. And that I find often helps the guardian then, because they can find ways at home as well, because I work with a lot of guardians of finding ways to help them brush the dogs at home, how to bath them at home, and just to help them use more consent-based methods so that the dogs can feel confident about being groomed. And
when we think,
I've had some real successes.
When we think about consent as a term, tell me more a little bit about that. What do you mean by consent grooming?
Okay, so most of the dogs I groom are groomed on a lowish table, and I've got some steps so the dogs can get on and off the table. So to me, consent is if they're sitting on the table, they're consenting me to groom them. If they get off the table, they're saying, no, stop for a minute. Other ways we can do it with something called Shrag-Tail's bucket game. So when they're looking at a bucket, we can groom. When it looks away, we stop grooming. A chin rest, where we teach the dog to put the chin in my hand. While the dog's got the chin in my hand, I can scissor around the face. If it removes the chin, then I stop scissoring. And it's all about giving them the choice to have the groom done, or actually, I just need a minute. Let me reset myself, and then I'll come back and have it done. Because most of the time, when I've got dogs just using what I call table protocol, they'll get down off the table, they'll go to my salon door, and then they'll have a look out the window, then come back, get back on the table, and it's almost as if that break away from the table, looking out the window, they've just managed to reset themselves and prepare themselves for a little bit more. It does take time to they get it really quickly, to be quite honest. Getting on off the table means grooming stops and starts. But I find the first time they don't get off many times, and by about the second, third appointment, they're thinking, I get this, I can keep getting on and off. And they almost, I think they do it more often on, say, the second or third appointment, because they know they can. And then by the 4th, 5th appointment, it's fine, yeah, I know I can get off when I want to. So actually I can sit here for half an hour without having to get off the table. So it's putting that effort in up front to let them know how to stop and start the groom. And then once they know they can stop and start the groom, they don't actually need to stop it, because they know they can if they really need to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? I think it's the dog learning that they can say no, which means that they're more likely to say yes. And I always think
Yes.
to things like the dentist, I think it's a good one, because many of us don't like the dentist
Yeah.
much. And when one thing's broken down, we want to be able to say, well, hang on a minute. Okay, now I'm ready. We want to be able to feel that if we need to, we could get up and have a walk around. You know, these things are very important, and they can make a huge difference to the emotional and mental well-being for the dog and their physical well-being, because if they're like, you know, I need to stretch my legs a bit now. You know, if you've got a dog on a table, I guess, for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, it's a lot. And I think the ability to be able to just stretch your legs and kind of have a bit of a movement can be really important.
Yeah, and to be quite honest, because I sit down to groom, I can't stand to groom. It just kills my legs and my feet. So I always sit, but sometimes I feel like I stand up and readjust my body and sit down. So when the dog gets off the table, I just readjust myself as well, and then we both come back and we're both comfortable and we're both ready to go again. And to be fair, by the 4th, 5th appointment, it probably takes me no longer to groom a dog than it would any other groomer. I might not get 100% finish, but it goes out my salon looking reasonable.
And that's the thing about communication with the caregiver, isn't it, with the guardian? Because I think, you know, you've said to me before that if you can, as a professional, to say to that guardian, you know, your dog really struggles with this and I need to break it down, and I might not be able to get the finish you want, but I can support your dog's emotional welfare. The vast majority of caregivers, guardians really appreciate that, and they want that.
Yeah, completely. And I think that because of the way I groom, and because I'm known for a good area around me to be almost the go-to person with dogs that really struggle with grooming, I've got a free license, to be quite honest, because they know if they come to me, I'm probably the last chance they've got to get their dog groomed without having to be sedated at the vets. And then it becomes really expensive then if you've got to have your dog sedated for every groom.
Yeah. And what kind of things do you do to try and support that kind of a calm environment in the salon, and to support the animal through that de-stress process?
Okay, I think it all starts, to be quite honest, the very first session. I like to start off on a positive footing or a positive paw, and then do ACE-free work, which is lots of different services, lots of different treats and food they can lick, food they can crunch, and they can just come into the salon. All they do is eat the food on the floor. And to be quite honest, it's rare, even really anxious dogs that have struggled in other grooming salons usually can come in and start eating straight away, which I think is a good sign. I do always use pet remedy on the first visit. I give the salon a bit of a squib and I put a bit on my clothing as well. So already I'm starting to find ways of building that calm, positive experience. So with the pet remedy, that we know that helps the emotional and mental state. So that's helping them calm straight away. So they're already having a calm experience. The free work helps them to calm even further. So by the time they've done the free work and ready to end the first session, they're actually feeling pretty calm about the salon environment. And that's what I want. The very first session, I just want the dog to feel comfortable and calm in the salon, and then I can build on from there. If I groom the dog the very first time it comes, I'm not doing anything different, so the dog won't feel any different, and then I've probably got to play catch up of trying to change that dog's perspective of what a grooming salon means. And then as we progress, you know, as it's taking part in the free work, I'll be looking at what sort of treats does it like. Does it like to lick, or does it like to snuffle, using a snuffle mat? And then I can start to incorporate the foods that the dog likes and the services the dogs like into the actual groom as well. So if they struggle, for example, to have their feet scissored, I'll perhaps have a licky mat on the table whilst I'm starting to work on their feet. And likewise, if they struggle with the face, I might have some of the favourite treats in my hand and feed them with one hand while I'm trimming the face with the other. And I try and keep it all as positive as possible, because if I do half of it positive and then force the rest of the groom, I'm not really helping the dog to cope. I'm just half helping and then say, well, I've fed up of doing, I'm just going to carry on with it now. So the dog won't really embrace that trust-based element of it.
Many groomers, including yourself, have said about, you mentioned there about using Pet Remedy, that Pet Remedy has been a bit of a game changer in the salon.
Yeah, and I think, to be quite honest, it helps me as well, because it obviously affects us as well, because our systems are all the same. But I've found that if I use Pet Remedy, because I've got a range of their products. I've got the spray, which I use with most dogs, but I've also got the shampoo as well, and that for some of my really anxious dogs is a real game changer, because it's on the body and it's close to the nose, and it's there permanently throughout the groom then. So for the more difficult dog, not the more difficult, the more anxious dogs, the ones that struggle that little bit more, I do tend to use the shampoo for them, as well as using the spray in the salon. My clothes always smell of Pet Remedy. I often wonder why my dogs are so calm, but I shouldn't really, because I smell of Pet Remedy all the time. It's my favourite perfume.
Maybe that's an extra avenue for the guys in the marketing department. Yeah. So the good thing is, a lot of the things that you do can be done by the guardians at home. Your book, Taking the Guru Out of Grooming, is a great introduction to caregivers, to guardians, about thinking about the grooming experience, what they can do at home, how they can best prepare their dog, a little insight into what might go on within the cooperative grooming process.
Yes, the consent-based stuff is really easy to do. Dogs get it so quickly. You really, once you've chosen which consent technique you want to use, and although you might not have a table, you might have a blanket that you can use, or a towel. So when the dog's sitting on that towel, that's when the grooming takes place. When it moves off the towel, that's when the grooming stops. And just start really simply by a few brushes, and then putting the brush down, see how your dog reacts. Does he stay on the towel, or does he get off the towel? If he stays on the towel, then just a few more brushes. And it's all about just building it up gradually. And all the techniques I've talked about today, they're all included in the book. So they're all given examples how to use them, a couple of case studies, how they've been used. But they're actually really simple techniques, and you've not got to go through, because I sometimes feel that people struggle with something like counter conditioning, whereas if you use a towel protocol, you don't have to do the counter conditioning so much, because you're giving the dog consent. They know they can move away and then come back when they feel like it, and eventually they'll start to trust that you can brush them, and you're not going to hurt them, and each time they might be able to cope with a little bit more. So for a start, they'll probably only cope with 2 or 3 brushes, but over time you can build up to 5 or 6, 7 or 8, and then eventually, you might be able to do a full leg or a torso. And it's all about breaking it down for the dog, basically, so that they can choose to engage with the grooming process or not.
That's been brilliant, Sue. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. And just a reminder again that Sue's book is called Taking the Guru Out of Grooming, and you can also find Sue on Facebook with a Facebook group of the same name, Taking the Guru Out of Grooming. Thank you so much, Sue, for today.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Bye.
Bye.